Be here and again, it's hard to believe this is kind of still my home church. My membership is here, so it's good to show up occasionally.
Well, last you were told your membership was still here.
Oh, maybe it isn't. Nobody wants me
It's
these
in a
days.
book
I'm
somewhere.
retired, so
You're always wanting to.
so
Always.
anyways. But I guess they couldn't find somebody else. Mark must have been busy. So, anyways, I noticed that they have a switch to turn me off, but they left it in my hands.
Uh-oh.
Hang off it.
You can just put it right here.
I want to share from God's Word from Isaiah chapter 40, a passage you probably know really well. It's all about the greatness of God. And I'm not going to read the whole chapter because that gets pretty long. But I want to focus on the last verses of that chapter, and particularly the last two. But in verse 27 it says, "Why do you say, O Jacob, and assert, O Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord, and the justice due me escapes the notice of my God? Do you not know, have you not heard, the everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, doesn't become weary or tired. His understanding is inscrutable. He gives strength to the weary, and to him who lacks might he increases power. Though youth grow weary and tired, and vigorous young men stumble badly, yet those who wait for the Lord will gain new strength. They will mount up with wings like eagles. They will run and not get tired. They will walk and not become faint." You ever get weary?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
I imagine the young people don't get weary very much. They get tired. You generally know when they're tired, right? Because they start misbehaving and get cranky, and you just know they need to go to sleep. But as you get older, you don't just get tired. I notice you start to get weary. And there's a difference between those two words. If you're tired, a good night's rest refreshes you and you carry on, right? You wake up in the morning and you're ready to go. If you're weary, no amount of sleep can re-energize you. Tiredness is exhaustion of energy. Weariness is exhaustion of hope. Tiredness depletes your muscles, but weariness depletes your mind. Tiredness is when your strength is gone, but weariness is when your spirit is gone. You want to give up. You can be tired yet not weary, but if you're weary, you're always tired. And I've met people like that. Sometimes I've been like that. I'm just always tired. You ask them, it can be first thing in the morning. How you do? Oh, I'm just so tired. And you always hear, well, I'm just so tired. It's no longer tiredness, it's weariness. And there's lots of things that are, I think, making people weary today. And that's what I notice. You know, you turn on that television channel and what do you hear? Oh no, COVID might be coming back. And you think of the last 3 years, right? And you say, oh, not again. Or you hear about the war in Ukraine and the possibility of nuclear warfare. You think, oh boy, I can't even do anything about that. And you think our world is in crises, or you get your statement from your bonds and securities, and you think you must have bought a truck. Because there's that much missing. inflation. I bought 2 loaves of bread yesterday, little loaves. It had 9 slices in it. Do you know how much those 2 loaves of bread cost me? No, 2 loaves, what was it, $17?
At a bakery?
Yes. I couldn't believe it. I thought, how am I going to survive on my pension? Man can't live by bread alone, but he needs some.
Well, you're lucky to have it, some people don't.
Yes. You know, now we're going to have a whole food shortage because of shipments of grain from Ukraine. All these things, or we get a medical report that just weighs us down and it wearies us. Wearies us. It doesn't make us tired, we're actually weary because we don't see a way out. And yet we have to live each day. Well, Isaiah wrote chapter 40 to those who were not just tired, but they were weary. It was not fatigue of the muscles, it was fatigue of the soul. It was written to those whose dreams had gone up in the smoke of disillusionment, and now they were left with the ashes of disappointment. They had been banished to Babylon, living in a foreign country. They heard news back from Jerusalem, how the city was all destroyed, it was all in ashes, everything's burnt, all of it's rubble. There's nothing really even to go back to. I always think of the people of Ukraine right now. They might win the war, but what's left? You see some of the pictures of all these ruined buildings. You think, what can you do with that? It's just rubble. Well, that's what it was for these people, thinking back. And when we lose our hope, we actually sink into a pattern of failure. We actually start moving from blunder to blunder because we quit making faith choices and we make desperate choices. And that's what Isaiah actually shows here. He says, we stumble badly when we get weary. And so that's what was happening here. Now, exhaustion can come through many ways. It can be outward circumstances that we have to deal with in life that just exhaust us. They sap our energy. It can be sin. Sin can literally cripple us because now we have to live this dual life. You know, children get tired. They play all day and you think, how can they get tired? Well, a lot of their tiredness is playing pretend. It's tiring to pretend, even if it's play. Sin can do that in our lives. Burnout is a term we often use today. It's an exhaustion, in part, from the shattering of our ideals. You can work tremendously hard and be energized. But once your ideals are shattered, you'll probably burn out. Once those dreams are gone, it may come from just serving other people all the time. Sometimes we talk about care fatigue. There is such a thing. Jesus was touched by a woman with a hemorrhage and it says he felt the strength go out from him. You can't be touching all kinds of people's lives without something leaving you. There's exhaustion that comes from battle fatigue. I think of Elijah when he's confronting the forces of Baal on Mount Carmel. And as soon as he's conquered, had that great victory, what happens to him? He sinks into depression and despair. He says, Lord, take my life. It's enough. I'm done. Well, regardless of the cause of weariness, we have to figure out how do we get renewed. And that's what Isaiah 40 verse 31 is all about. He says, those who wait for the Lord will renew or exchange their strength. What oxygen is to the lungs, hope is for the soul. And what Isaiah was saying is we have to have a fresh focus that gives us hope. And that's why he writes the previous part of chapter 40, which is this picture of the greatness and the grandeur of God. Who's measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, or marked off the heavens by the span, calculated the dust of the earth by measure, weighed the mountains in a balance? What's he doing? He's describing to the Israelites, God is much bigger than anything you're dealing with. God is this amazing, almighty God. Doesn't matter what's happening in the world, God's bigger than that. Remember Job when he had lost all his family and all his possessions, and he's sitting in the ashes and he's scraping the boils off his skin. And he starts saying, Lord, why are you doing this to me? I want to have an audience with you. I want to talk to you because I can't figure out how I deserve this. And so he challenges God to a discussion. And finally God takes him up on it. He says, okay, Job, you want to talk with me? Sit down. And I'll ask the questions and you answer them. And what does God go and do in chapter 4? He goes and he's like a legal prosecutor. He badgers him with question after question. Where were you when I planned this world? Who gave me, did you give me counsel when I created this universe? Were you there when I hollowed out the oceans and took all that mud and put it there at the end of Alberta and said, there's my rock pile? I was like that because people are so enamored with the mountains. And the first time I drove across the prairies, I'm from Manitoba, flatland, right? You can take and hit a golf ball and it rolls forever and ever. I was absolutely taken up with the immensity of the prairies, the flatlands. Then I hit the Rockies. I thought, everyone says the Rockies are so... Who would want to be here? You couldn't grow a field of wheat here anywhere. Well, I've changed my mind a little bit over the years. Got into camping, so. I always say Alberta, the Rockies is God's rock pile, right on the edge of his garden. Well, we have to have this great sense of how big God is. And we actually only really get weary if we lose hope. When the circumstances are bleak, when the battle's strong, when the body is tired, we very quickly lose perspective and sink into despair. And that's what's happening to Israel here. In verse 27 he says, why do you say these things, O Jacob, O Israel, that my way is hidden from the Lord? If you knew how big God is, you'd know that he knows exactly what you're going through. Why do you say that the justice due me escapes me? Israel felt forgotten, they felt shut out, they felt unnoticed by God. And if that's really the case, hope is gone, right? The moment you think that God doesn't give two hoots about you, your hope's gone. And so it's so crucial that we have a glimpse of God. And so what Isaiah says you have to wait on the Lord. Whatever wait is, it means to stop and pause and linger and rethink. And so all of Isaiah 40 is this grand and eloquent description of God's greatness. To whom then will you compare me? Where will you find my likeness? So that Israel gets a fresh glimpse that God is bigger than all their problems. And they can be encouraged once again. Nothing absolutely does as much for us as if we could have a glimpse of God. That's why sometimes we want to just take off and retreat and go up into the mountains or whatever and just be able to see the greatness of all that's around us. Sit on a mountaintop and realize, my God is bigger than all of this. Or look into the starry sky and realize that, boy, God is behind even that Milky Way up there. And yet He cares about me. He hasn't forgotten me. Elijah could resume his ministry after he met God at Mount Horeb. And a still small voice came in the wind. He had had a fresh glimpse of God. Moses, when he came down from Mount Sinai, could spend 40 years dealing with a critical, grumbling, complaining people in the desert. But he had had a glimpse of God. The disciples could turn the world upside down after seeing the resurrected Lord. Previous to that, they were shut up in the upper room. Scared, cowards of all of them. The key was to linger, to take time. I like what Charles Swindoll says. He says that we speed up when we have lost our way. Isn't that what we generally do? We lose our way and we start getting frantic. And we want to go faster. And yet, instead we're told, wait, linger, become calm. Be still and know that I am God, it says. We need to stop and hear God, listen to God, get a new glimpse of God, and then renew our strength. The word is to exchange. Somehow we have to figure out, how do I take all this negative things in my mind and exchange them? And I don't know how you do that, but one of the ways I do that is by reading. I've got to be able to, I can take so much bad news, but then I have to take and read something that's inspirational. I've got to be exchanging things, trading them. The negative in life can't continually fill you. Sometimes you got to take the positive in and realize that there are good things. I read my bank statement and I get discouraged. Then I'm reminded, Lord, you've taken care of me for 67 years. You see, that's exchanging. Why should I doubt you now? We have to continually do that, exchanging our problems for God's promises as well. We have to remind ourselves, like the Jewish refugee in the Polish camp, who scrolled on the prison walls, I believe in the sun, even when it isn't shining. I believe in love, even when I'm alone. And I believe in God, even when He's silent. See, that prisoner was exchanging things. The bleakness of his circumstances. So renewal comes as we exchange and we stop and we linger. Then renewal comes, though, in different ways. It says they're going to mount up with wings like eagles, run and not get tired. They'll walk and not faint. Now, I want to ask the young kids here, which would you do? Which would you prefer to do? Be like an eagle soaring? Be like a runner running endlessly or just walking? Yes.
An eagle soaring.
Yeah. That's the most exciting, isn't it?
Yeah. My grandma told me actually, flying horses are this is just from my grandma. Flying horses is like being able to fly.
Be great to be able to fly. You know, and sometimes in a way we do fly. We have such excitement and exhilaration.
Like flying on an airplane.
Yeah, it's like ecstasy that just keeps us going, and we have such hope that it seems like God's got a green light in front of us and just go, go, go. That's exciting when life is like that. You feel that you've got wind beneath your wings, and you feel carried as though effortlessly. I think about this church, the stages it's gone through. I remember us starting. There was a lot of excitement, a lot of anticipation. It was like this was almost effortless to get this thing going. It took off the ground just like that. At least it seemed it did. Wind beneath our wings, and then all of a sudden we had to realize, oh, but there's a steady pace that has to be kept. And we had to learn to run and not get tired. And where are we now? Maybe we're at the place we gotta just figure out how to walk and not give up. Right? We love it when energy comes like enthusiasm and exhilaration. I think that's what Elijah had on Mount Carmel when he had confronted 850 prophets of Baal. He wasn't even intimidated. He could take on the whole world. It says that he had come there after standing before the Lord. You see, he had got a glimpse of God. And 850 prophets of Baal didn't intimidate him. Sometimes we have that, the excitement of a challenge, adrenaline rush, the hope of a breakthrough that makes us soar. But we generally don't stay there. Generally somewhere we start having to run and just not get tired. Just not give up. It's just that energy that consistently lets us keep going day by day and running. I think of periods of ministry I've had in life where I was profoundly surprised by my energy level. The short nights I could keep, the long days I could put in, the number of sermons I could crank out in a week. I used to say when I was in my 30s, sermons fell out of my sleeves, it seemed. They don't anymore.
Lost them by now.
Yeah, it's hard work. I preached them all, I guess, or something. But hope was so alive that energy seemed to be there in surplus quantities. It says of Gideon when he was taking and pursuing the Midianites that they were tired yet still pursuing. Because the taste of victory was so close that they didn't give up. Well, it's wonderful when we have that. But that doesn't always last either. And sometimes we just grind down, and we have to just learn to walk and not faint, not quit. We move from exhilaration to energy to simply endurance. And that, by the way, is the hardest part.
No.
We like to think that soaring maybe is the hardest part, but soaring has an energy all its own that keeps you going. There's a second wind that can come with running. But sometimes you just plod. One foot in front of the other. Elijah had excitement and energy, but he lacked endurance. When Jezebel finally said, "I'm going to get you," one woman could put him to flight. and he sank into despair. Walking is the routine of life. It's the mundane. It's the daily drudgery. It really isn't the giants that defeat us. It's the mosquitoes. I used to love reading about the exploration, the history of Canada, as the voyagers slowly made their way from east to west. And it wasn't the rapids and the portages they had to make and all that. What absolutely frustrated them was the black flies. Right? It's those things that undo us. Sometimes in battle, it's the flak that peppers you. It's not the fact that you take a mortal wound. And you have to learn to plod. I've discovered, though, that people who plod often get the furthest. They really do. I'm amazed at how many leaders I've met when you ask them the secret to success, whether in their skill and with an organization or as a pastor or whatever, they'll say, well, I didn't have a lot of gifts, but one thing I could do, I could plod. Sometimes endurance gives the victory. It's like the rabbit and the hare, right? Pardon, the rabbit and the rabbit and the turtle. Turtle wins in the end, right? It's walking that is the test of hope's stability. Now, when is renewal the most important? Renewal is the most important when your progress is slowest. Soaring is easy, and it'll carry you sometimes great distances. Running is more difficult, but you might catch a second wind. But the ability to walk is the very hardest thing in life. I think that's why the new exercise program is power walking. They're not jogging anymore. They're walking. Because that's the greatest exercise. To walk and not become weary. When life is reduced to a crawl and we're going nowhere, we need that strength the most. And it's often the hardest. When I was in my teens, I have a bit of an engineer mind. Some say I should have been an engineer rather than a pastor. But that's fine. It's kind of late now. But I was fascinated when I read one time about steam engines. And what fascinated me was the fact that they said a steam engine has the most power when it's at a standstill and just stoking its fire. Now that's different than a gas or a diesel motor, which gets power as it's speeding up. Each additional RPM gives it more power. But a steam engine actually loses power as it starts cycling and losing steam with every cycle. But it's got the most power at the most critical time, when you have to get going. And I thought, why don't they invent cars with steam motors? Because you'd be able to spin out those tires at every stop sign. Right? Makes sense to me. Of course, then I was one of these people that would gladly replace tires. But I often think about that. A steam engine gathers the most power when it's at a standstill, when it's learned to stop, to linger, and stoke its fires. And it just builds pressure. Maybe that's something that we have to learn in life to sometimes do. slow down, think again, let's restoke the fire. And then let's get going again. Those who wait for the Lord will gain new strength. They will mount up with wings again as eagles, run and not get tired, walk and not become weary. And if they stop, they'll get started. Because he gives strength to the weary, and to those who lack might, he increases the power. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for your word once again. And I pray that for people here that maybe are weary, or maybe as a church we're collectively weary. And we need to just pause, we need to slow down, we need to rethink, we need to exchange again the things that discourage us with fresh hope from you. Renew us and give us strength once again to be able to get going. Amen.